Trevor didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just slid a folder across the table and said, "We're going to transition you out, effective today." My throat went dry. I looked down at the folder like it might explain itself. Didn't. My badge stopped working 5 minutes earlier. My calendar was already wiped. The room smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't a meeting. It was an erasure. I'd walked through security that morning like any other Wednesday, swiped my card, grabbed coffee from the third-floor kitchen, checked my emails. Normal. Routine. Then I got the calendar invite. 30 minutes. Conference room 4B. No agenda. No context. Just Trevor's name and HR. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. You don't get pulled into surprise meetings with your VP and HR unless something's already decided. I was right. Trevor sat across from me now. Hands folded like a professor explaining basic math. Beside him, Patricia from HR kept her eyes on her laptop screen, typing notes I'd never see. Then he smiled. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. We need to control the narrative before this turns into something it doesn't need to be. Control the narrative. My ears rang. I stared at the wall behind him because if I looked at his face, I might say something I couldn't take back. The words hung in the air like smoke. Heavy. Suffocating. Around the table no one spoke. No one defended me. Patricia kept typing. The junior manager Trevor brought as a witness kept nodding like this all made sense. I wanted to ask what narrative. What story was I supposedly creating? But my voice felt stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Trevor continued, smooth as silk. Your performance hasn't aligned with our evolving expectations. We think a fresh start would benefit everyone. Performance. Expectations. Fresh start. Corporate speak for "we're firing you, and we've already written the script." I realized HR wasn't surprised. Patricia had rehearsed this. She knew every word Trevor would say before he said it. This wasn't a conversation. It was theater. And I was the only one without a script. My chest felt tight like the air had thickened. I had walked into work expecting a normal Tuesday. I was leaving without a job, without access, without my name on anything I built. Trevor closed his notebook first. That's how I knew this was planned. Everything about him was calculated. The way he tapped his pen twice before speaking. The way he checked his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. He did. He had to get back to pretending this never happened. I stood up slowly. My legs felt shaky, but I kept my face blank. Neutral. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "I'll need to collect my things," I said quietly. "Already handled," Patricia replied, sliding a small cardboard box across the table. My desk plant, coffee mug, framed photo of my dog. Everything else had been erased. Picked up the box. It was lighter than I expected. 11 years reduced to objects that fit in my hands. I walked out with my head high and my hands shaking. I didn't cry. Not yet. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. And before that morning I was the senior lead on the most visible initiative in our division. One that touched executive reporting, compliance, and external partners. The kind of role that doesn't make noise unless something goes wrong. Which is exactly why Trevor needed me gone. I wasn't flashy. I didn't seek attention or credit. I built systems that worked quietly in the background. Data pipelines that fed quarterly reports. Compliance frameworks that kept regulators happy. Integration protocols that made our partners trust us. Boring stuff. Essential stuff. The kind of work that leadership forgets about until it stops working. Then suddenly everyone remembers your name. For 11 years, I'd been the person they called when fires started. Put them out. Documented everything. Made sure the same mistakes didn't happen twice. Trevor used to call me dependable. Solid. Team player. Then something changed. He didn't always see me as a threat. Trevor joined as VP 6 months after I'd stabilized a failing program. First he praised me publicly. Called me solid. Reliable. Brought me into executive meetings to explain technical details he didn't understand. I thought we worked well together. I was wrong. Then one day, in a meeting with division leadership, he misstated a timeline. Said we'd complete a regulatory filing in 2 weeks. I knew it would take 6. Minimum. I didn't embarrass him. I just waited until he finished, then said calmly, "Actually, based on the vendor dependencies, we're looking at mid-October. I can send you the breakdown after this." His smile froze for half a second. Just a flicker. So brief I almost missed it. But I didn't miss the way his jaw tightened. Or the way he nodded slowly, like I just challenged him in front of his boss. "Right," he said. "Mid-October. That's what I meant." It wasn't. After that meeting, he pulled me aside in the hallway. Usual. Friendly. "Hey, next time you have concerns about timelines, let's sync up first. I don't want mixed messages confusing leadership." He nodded. "Of course." After that, things shifted. Invites stopped coming. Meetings happened without me. Decisions were made in rooms I used to be part of. Then I was asked to own the outcomes anyway. When I pushed back, politely with data, Trevor said I was struggling with alignment. Alignment. That word became his weapon. "I need you aligned with the broader vision," he'd say when I raised concerns. "This feels like you're not fully aligned," he'd tell me when I asked questions. Aligned meant agreeing. Aligned meant silence. I started documenting more carefully. Every email. Every decision. Every conversation that felt off. I kept a folder on my personal drive labeled Project Notes. Boring title. Critical contents. I saved everything. Timestamps. Meeting notes. Conflicting instructions. Emails where Trevor told me one thing, then told leadership something different. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. Just instinct. A small voice in the back of my head saying, "You're going to need this." That habit saved me later. I flagged a compliance concern in writing. Clear language. Neutral tone. We were cutting corners on a vendor audit process. Small corners. The kind that regulators notice. I wrote it up carefully. No accusations. Just facts. Current approach may not satisfy Section 12 requirements. Recommend additional validation steps before submission. Trevor pulled me aside and said, "Let's not overcomplicate this. Sometimes perfect is the enemy of done." He submitted a softened version. Without my name. Without the specific regulatory reference. Just vague language about process improvements under review. I kept my original draft. Timestamp. Save. 2 months later, the vendor audit came back flagged. Not failed. Just flagged. Enough to trigger additional scrutiny. Enough to make leadership nervous. Trevor called an emergency meeting. Asked why no one had raised concerns earlier. I stayed quiet. The risk didn't disappear. At an executive review 3 months into his tenure, Trevor presented my work as his own. I watched the recording later. Same slides. Same phrasing. Different voice. He walked through my compliance framework like he'd designed it. Explained my vendor risk matrix like he'd built it. Answered questions using language I'd written in briefing notes I'd sent him the night before. When leadership praised the work, he said, "My team handled it beautifully. Really proud of their execution." Their execution. Not my design. I told myself it didn't matter. Leaders take credit for their teams. That's normal. That's how it works. But then problems surfaced. Minor issues. Implementation delays. A vendor that pushed back on contract terms. Suddenly Trevor's language changed. Eleanor's handling that piece. I've given her clear direction, but execution has been inconsistent. When questions came, he said, "My team handled it." When problems surfaced, he named me. Deadlines tightened. Resources vanished. Expectations doubled. Trevor asked for status updates in writing, daily. Not verbal check-ins. Written reports. Emailed by end of day. Every day. Gave them. Precisely. Documented every blocker. Every resource gap. Every dependency that wasn't being addressed. He never responded to the blockers. Never solved the resource issues. Just kept asking for updates. Then in meetings he'd say things like, "I haven't gotten clear visibility into where we're stuck." I'd forward him my daily updates. Time-stamped. Till. He'd already received 12 that month alone. "Right," he'd say. I meant forward-looking visibility. The goalposts kept moving. The documentation kept growing. He was building a file. A story about an underperforming employee who couldn't communicate effectively, who struggled with accountability, who created problems instead of solving them. So was I. HR called it a check-in. Informal. Just touching base. How was I feeling about my role? Any concerns? Any feedback? I realized Trevor had been talking about me for months. The questions were too specific. Too practiced. How do you handle situations where you disagree with leadership direction? Tell me about a time you felt your communication wasn't received well. What do you do when you feel out of alignment with team priorities? These weren't random questions. They were following a script, building a case. I answered carefully, professionally, documented the conversation afterward. Who was present? What was asked? Patricia smiled through the whole thing. Sympathetic. Understanding. "We just want to make sure you feel supported." Supported. Like I was fragile. Like I was the problem. I left that meeting knowing exactly what was happening. Trevor wasn't just building a file. He'd already shared it with HR. They were collaborating. He had a story ready. Back in the conference room, Trevor slid the separation agreement toward me. "You can take a few days to review this. Have a lawyer look at it if you want. We're not trying to rush you." Not trying to rush me. My badge was already deactivated. My access already revoked. My calendar already wiped. I didn't touch the agreement. Just looked at it. Severance in exchange for silence. A standard non-disparagement clause. Return of company property. Nothing unusual. Except page 7. Section 4C. A waiver of claims I hadn't made. A release of liability for actions I hadn't accused them of. Language so broad it covered any and all potential grievances, known or unknown. Why would they need protection from unknown grievances? I looked up at Trevor. He was checking his phone. Patricia was closing her laptop. The witness was already standing up. They thought this was over. There was a clause he didn't notice. I didn't argue. Didn't defend myself. Didn't explain. I just picked up the folder, picked up my box and walked out. Trevor relaxed. I saw it in his shoulders. The way he exhaled. The way he made a joke to Patricia as I left. Something about grabbing lunch. He thought I was defeated, broken, ready to sign anything to make this go away. I wasn't. I went home, fed my dog, sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold while I stared at the separation agreement. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the folder I'd been keeping. Project notes. 11 months of documentation. Emails. Meeting summaries. Conflicting instructions. Time-stamped evidence of every conversation Trevor had rewritten in his own mind. I organized everything chronologically. Cross-referenced dates. Made sure every claim had a corresponding document. No emotion. No accusations. Just facts. Then I found the company's whistleblower policy. The formal disclosure process no one thinks about, until it's used. It was still active. Still binding. And according to the employee handbook, it superseded separation agreements. I wasn't defeated. There's a formal disclosure process no one thinks about, until it's used. Followed it exactly. Submitted through the confidential portal. Attached documents. Time-stamped. Cross-referenced. Subject. Concerns regarding executive conduct and retaliation. No accusations. No anger. Just records. Emails. Meeting notes. Clear timeline showing. Trevor presenting my work without attribution. Trevor softening compliance concerns I'd raised in writing. Trevor requesting daily status updates, then claiming lack of visibility. Trevor's escalating pattern of exclusion after I'd corrected him publicly. HR's check-in questions that revealed prior conversations about my performance. The separation agreement's unusually broad liability waiver. I didn't editorialize, didn't interpret, just presented facts and let the document speak. Then I hit submit. The system responded automatically. Your disclosure has been received and assigned a case number. You will hear from the compliance office within 5 business days. Closed my laptop, fed my dog, went to bed. The system responded automatically. Trevor avoided eye contact in the hallway. I saw him exactly once in the 2 weeks after I submitted my disclosure. He was leaving the building as I was entering to collect something from HR. He saw me. I know he saw me. But he turned and walked the other direction. Quickly. Like I was contagious. Legal scheduled a call. Not HR. Legal. They didn't tell me what it was about. Just asked if I was available for a 30-minute conversation. They asked careful questions. Professional. Neutral. Can you walk us through your understanding of the timeline? Do you have documentation supporting these claims? Did you raise these concerns through other channels first? I answered calmly. Precisely. Sent them the full folder. I slept for the first time in weeks. Real sleep. Dreamless. They asked for Trevor's documentation. He tried to recreate it. Backdated emails. Edited meeting notes. Wrote performance reviews that didn't exist when they supposedly happened. But dates didn't match. Language contradicted earlier reports. File metadata showed recent edits. Someone noticed. A senior compliance officer named Vincent. He'd been with the company for 20 years. Seen every kind of documentation game. He started pulling original records. Server logs. Email timestamps. Calendar histories. Trevor's reconstructed timeline fell apart under scrutiny. An email he claimed to have sent in March. The server showed it was composed in April, the same day I submitted my disclosure. Performance concerns he said he'd raised verbally in January. No calendar invites. No follow-up emails. No documentation until May. A coaching conversation he said happened in February. I was on approved vacation. Out of the country. Passport stamped. The review widened. Executives started looping me in directly. Not emotionally. Factually. Can you verify this email chain? Do you have notes from this meeting? What was your understanding of this decision? I answered every question with documentation. Forwarded original emails. Shared meeting notes with timestamps. Provided context without editorializing. Trevor wasn't included. He'd been removed from the review process. Isolated. The investigation was now about him, not me. Vincent scheduled another call. We're expanding the scope. Your disclosure raised questions about other decisions. Other patterns. We're interviewing your former team members. I stayed calm. Kept my voice even. I'm happy to help however I can. You already have, he said quietly. Trevor wasn't included. The word audit changes how people breathe. It appeared in an email subject line. Internal review. Executive leadership practices. Audit phase. Trevor's confidence cracked. I heard it through back channels. Former colleagues reaching out quietly. Did you hear Trevor's on administrative review? Legal's been pulling all his emails. Someone said they're interviewing his whole chain. Mine didn't crack. I went about my days calmly. Applied for new jobs. Walked my dog. Answered legal's questions when they came. They traced decisions upward. Not just Trevor's actions toward me. Other issues. Other employees. A pattern of credit claiming and blame shifting that went back 2 years. A junior analyst who'd left abruptly. A contractor whose contract wasn't renewed after raising concerns. A senior manager who'd transferred divisions unexpectedly. Vincent asked me if I knew them. I did. We'd compared notes once. Quietly. Over coffee. Months ago. Before I knew how bad it would get. They traced decisions upward. They realized the pattern didn't start with me. It started with him. Trevor had a history. Not documented formally. Not investigated thoroughly. Just whispers. Exit interviews that mentioned leadership challenges, without specifics. HR had cleared him every time. Coaching conversations. Professional development plans. Fresh starts. But now they were looking deeper. Pulling records from his previous division. Talking to people who'd worked with him before his promotion. The story was the same. Talented individual contributor promoted too fast. Charismatic in interviews. Skilled at managing up. Terrible at managing people who questioned him. He'd left a trail of quiet exits. People who left rather than fight. People who took severance and signed non-disparagement agreements and moved on. Except this time someone fought back. With documents. With timestamps. With a clear, unemotional record that couldn't be dismissed as personality conflict or poor culture fit. His boss called me. Trevor's boss. The senior vice president. Why didn't we know, he asked. Not accusatory. Genuinely confused. Like he couldn't understand how this had happened under his leadership. I answered calmly. I documented it. I raised concerns through appropriate channels. I followed the compliance disclosure process exactly as written. But before that, why didn't you come to me directly? Pause. Chose my words carefully. With respect, I didn't think I'd be believed. Trevor was good at controlling narratives. I needed proof, not just complaints. Silence on the other end. Long heavy. I'm sorry, he said finally. This shouldn't have happened. 3 weeks after my termination, Trevor was placed on administrative leave. Pending investigation. No access to systems. No contact with team members. The narrative he'd tried to control was unraveling. Publicly. Permanently. Trevor was placed on leave. No announcement. No goodbye email. His name just disappeared from systems. His calendar cleared. His Slack status changed to away and never changed back. People noticed. Course they noticed. You don't just vanish from a VP role without people asking questions. But no one got answers. Just silence. Professional silence. Trevor is no longer with the company. His responsibilities have been reassigned. I heard through former colleagues that he'd tried to fight it. Hired a lawyer. Threatened his own legal action. But the documentation was overwhelming. His reconstructed timeline was obviously fabricated. And now there were other witnesses. Other victims. He couldn't control this narrative. 2 months after my termination he called me. Unknown number. I let it ring. Listened to the voicemail later. Eleanor. It's Trevor. Hey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to talk. Clear the air. I think we can both walk away from this professionally. Call me back. His voice was different. Muller. Uncertain. He called me. I watched the phone ring. Then I turned it face down. Let it go to voicemail. Deleted it without listening a second time. He called 3 more times over 2 weeks. Then stopped. I didn't respond. Didn't engage. Didn't give him the conversation he wanted. The one where he could spin this as a mutual misunderstanding. Where he could soften the edges and save face. He'd controlled the narrative for too long. I wasn't giving him another chapter. Instead I received an offer. Not from my old company. From one of their partners. A director-level position. Better title. Better pay. Better leadership. The hiring manager had worked with me on a joint project 2 years earlier. She'd watched me navigate a crisis with precision and calm. She remembered. I heard you left, she said during our first call. I'm sorry that happened. You deserve better. I almost cried. Almost. Instead I said, thank you. I'd love to hear more about the role. I received an offer. Leadership apologized. Publicly. Privately. The senior vice president sent a formal letter. Professional. Careful. Acknowledging that my termination had been handled improperly. That I'd been retaliated against for raising legitimate concerns. That the company failed to protect me. They offered me more money to stay. Restoration of my position. Back pay. A formal apology in my file. Assurances that things would be different. I read the email 3 times. Felt nothing. They wanted to fix this quietly. Bring me back. Pretend it never happened. Move forward. But I'd already moved forward. I'd already accepted the other offer. I'd already started imagining a workplace where I didn't have to document every conversation just to protect myself. Thank you for the offer, I wrote back. But I've accepted a position elsewhere. I wish you all the best. Short. Professional. Final. I declined. Trevor's resignation was framed as personal reasons. Everyone knew better. The story spread quietly through back channels. Former colleagues. Industry contacts. LinkedIn updates that said nothing but meant everything. Trevor is exploring new opportunities. No one believed it. No one mourned his exit. He lost the narrative he tried to control. The story wasn't about a struggling employee anymore. It was about an executive who built his career on other people's work and destroyed anyone who threatened to expose him. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. Just closed that chapter of my life and moved on. But I kept the documents. All of them. Backed up in 3 places. Just in case. Because some stories need to be preserved. Not as weapons. As warnings. Accepted the new role. New team. New leadership. New culture. I walked into my first day without the weight I'd carried for 18 months. No fear of speaking up. No carefully worded emails designed to protect myself. No daily status reports to prove I was working. Just work. Real work. The kind where you solve problems and build systems and collaborate with people who respect your expertise. My new manager asked for my input in meetings. Actually listened. Said I disagree sometimes and we work through it like adults. No one called it alignment issues. No one questioned my communication style. No one documented my every move like I was on probation. I wasn't careful anymore. I was respected. People noticed the difference in me. You seem lighter, a colleague said after my first month. Like you can actually breathe. Could. One final thought followed me. Trevor thought power was perception. Control the narrative, control reality. Say it confidently enough and people believe you. Rewrite history and it becomes true. I knew better. I knew that truth doesn't disappear just because someone tries to bury it. Documentation doesn't lie. Timestamps don't change. Facts don't bend to convenience. He built his power on words. I built mine on records. In the end, his story fell apart under scrutiny. Mine didn't. Because it wasn't a story. It was evidence. Some people think revenge is dramatic. Public confrontations. Angry speeches. Burning bridges. But real power is quieter. It's keeping records. Following processes. Staying calm when others want you to break. It's knowing that documentation outlasts deception. That truth is patient. That systems, when used correctly, protect the people who need protecting. Trevor tried to erase me. Instead, he wrote his own ending. And I was the documentation.